Hey everyone, my name is Abigail Haslam, and I am currently a psychology student here at Seminole State College, and this is for one of my online classes, Criminal Evidence. In this class, we're learning about different types of evidence used in courts, so today I'm going to be discussing on circumstantial evidence. I have my note cards right here to help me along with this video. I did not have any other notes with me or any other tablets to discuss through as we go throughout this video. Now, before we get into the main points of this video, as what is circumstantial evidence, how to prove against impartial jury members, different court cases applied with circumstantial evidence, and the general conclusion, let's get into a scenario to better understand circumstantial evidence. Let's say that there is a stabbing, you get called out to a stabbing at a local butcher shop, and there's two guys that walk out of that butcher shop. Silas, who has a bloody knife and is covered in blood, and Elliot, who is clean. There is no blood on him, and while he seems kind of panicky and frantic, there's nothing typically concluding that he ended up hurting anybody. How exactly would we say who did it? General conclusions would lead that Silas was the one who killed the person because he's bloody and he's carrying a knife. But keep in mind, we're at a butcher shop. It's their job to cut up animals and sell them as meat once the animal's already dead and everything. They use that to be able to work. But there's a stabbing located at that shop. Now, we're going to learn how to piece together exactly who did it, and if we don't have any evidence, like any cameras or any witnesses, how do we be able to prove this? So, what is circumstantial evidence? In Donnelly's book, Criminal Evidence, the textbook we use for a class, Donnelly points out the definition of circumstantial evidence, which is simply evidence that provides a fact by inference. So a jury can take logic and reasoning to piece together what they heard and make a general conclusion to tie if someone is guilty or if they're innocent. And adding on to this point, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her name, so I'll do the best I can, but Kaya Waldry, in her article, Legal Analysis of the Use of Circumstantial Evidence Theory, she initially points out it doesn't come directly from eyewitnesses or participants, but rather it can be physical or mere circumstances in which probable explanation explains or proves indirect evidence that is containing a factor and explanation of the case. So, pretty much, this is how we are able to piece together different things that we've heard and seen to prove if someone is guilty or innocent. Not just having the direct evidence in itself, like cameras or witnesses, but able to use logic and reasoning to piece together what happened. But how are we able to tell if a jury is impartial or not? Well, the U.S. Constitution firmly states that we should not have an impartial jury, and we should have a fair and case. However, sometimes jury members can be impartial sometimes, as they may play off of emotions or play off of what they firmly believe. Best ways to combat this is by using open-ended questions throughout the case, by having the bigger point of view and having as much evidence and piecing together that we can have. Not just saying that, okay, because someone walked out at this time and with this on them, that they're instantly at fault. Look back to the overarching story of the case. So, reframing the scenario, who's not to say that Elliot was the boss and ended up having prior beef with the person who was stabbed, let's say Bob, and Silas was there just for work, and the person stabbed didn't have any stab wounds that matched that knife. we need to figure out more things together before we just tie somebody with one certain thing. While at the same time, though, if it is in the right favor, not right favor, but if there is logic and reasoning to point that that person is at fault, then there's that logic or reasoning. Like, let's say that Elliot was never in this circumstance and Silas was the only one on scene. Then we could use circumstantial evidence to find, okay, he did walk out with blood, and while he may work there, there's nobody else on scene. The timing lines up all perfectly to match that that person was stabbed at that time, nobody else was there, and he walked out with a knife that could have matched that person's body. Therefore, we have enough evidence to prove that person's guilty. Moving on, we have different cases that can apply to this that we've learned from previous times, so we can use this knowledge moving forward. In examples like United States versus Yoshida. Yoshida's case was where, so she smuggled in immigrants from overseas on like an airplane at this airport. And the facts that leading into the case were she arrived at this gate with these 3 immigrants at the exact time they arrived, which is already kind of suspicious as is, but who's not to say that it was a mere coincidence that she arrived at the same time? Anybody can do that. It's a big airport, right? But moving on, she ended up having fake names of those 3 immigrants in her undergarments. That's not a mere coincidence of itself. That is an additional thing tying onto it. She, in her defense, she said that ended up coming from somebody else who she just perhaps talked to. And as she talked to that person who was smuggling them or in communication with smuggling with those immigrants, that's how she received that. So she wasn't smuggling them herself, and she wasn't helping them smuggle them. She just ended up having the names of them. But that, as long with arriving at the same gate, and additionally, when she got on the board of the airplane, she sat right behind them. These 3 things aren't things that just randomly happen, but are things that we can use to say, hey, that right there, that's not a coincidence, but rather that's what we can say to prove someone is guilty of that crime. In conclusion, circumstantial evidence is piecing together a big puzzle. It's taking different things that we've heard and seen to be able to help prove someone is either guilty or if someone is innocent. It's not just taking one thing and saying, oh, that person is guilty because of this, but taking the overall arching of the story. This removes the biased jury as we ask open-ended questions, as we can even play devil's advocate, asking multiple different questions and looking into everything to pinpoint the verdict. Thank you.